We are joined today by Linda Wiebe. Now, we've had an opportunity to speak with you in the past. You have a story that actually many people can relate to, but don't know where to go sometimes. January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and you have a very personal story when it comes to Alzheimer's. Tell us a little bit about your story, Linda.
Well, in about 10 years, 11 years ago, I guess, I noticed changes in my husband, and we went through the whole journey of, um, going to doctors, getting assessments done. He was finally assessed in fall of 2019 with Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia. And at the time, I knew a lot about Alzheimer's because I had, people around me that had it, but I'd never really been around anybody that had Lewy body dementia. And it goes faster and it's very behavioral. Um, there's hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, vivid dreams, wandering. So, um, yeah, the journey was there, and we were one of the couples like that was very privileged to be able to resource through um, getting to know like the Alzheimer's Society and mental health and home care. We were able to do the self and family managed care where I hired staff, and it allowed way more freedom. It allowed Herb to still have like the opportunity to go and do things, especially during COVID. Um, the caregivers could take him for drives. They could go to parks. They could do a lot of things because Herb is a people person, and it would have been the worst thing would be to isolate him. That would have been, I think, the toughest thing on the journey. So what happened was when the first time we were asked to do something for the Alzheimer's Society, Herb said to me, "If our story can help someone else, like let's get it out there." So everything that I'm doing and telling people is with his permission, even though he can't do that anymore. Um, so we had staffing in our home for almost 2 years, and the last 8 months were so bad. Like we were hardly managing. But Herb had been on a waiting list at Rest Haven for 18 months. So I remember going there one time and just saying, I can't do this anymore. I need help. And I have to do a, home care and mental health. Once you get them in your corner and they come and do assessments regularly, they were just amazing. And they helped me come up with, like, we had an emergency plan in place. Yeah, when you have resources like that. So my big encouragement would be once you, even before you get a diagnosis, get your doctor to get you like hooked up with the supports that are available in your area. That was huge. So he went into the home 2.5 years ago, just over 2.5 years ago, and they said my doctor warned me it would be the hardest year of my life, and I would say they prepared me that it would take 6 to 9 months for my loved one to adjust. And I would say it was definitely at least 9 months. Um, the Yeah, so I think I wanted to share a little bit about something that I was able to get access to. I think part of it is like just to give people an understanding because most of us know people with Alzheimer's, but we don't understand kind of how I say reverse development, but that's not what it is. I found through um, talking to some nurses, I kept asking, did they have anything when they went to school that would have any kind of information that I could use for this? And so I got a report, and it was by Dr. Barry Reisberg, Reisberg. He's a professor of psychology at the New York University School of Medicine. And they developed a system to identify stages of the disease called the Global Deterioration Scale. So basically what it is the person regresses backwards whereas the child's brain progresses forward. So the person in early stages of dementia will have a skill level of a 5 to 7 year old. This leads us to alter our expectations on their cognitive and motor abilities, and also they can't be alone, right? You wouldn't leave your 5 or 7 year old alone. So by them determining this development age of a person with Alzheimer's or Lewy body, you can better understand their behavior and adapt the environment, and so that our expectations will be realistic, and it just gives us a better option. I think that's where a lot of our frustration came in the very beginning, because you're just like, well, why are you acting like that? Because until you have a diagnosis, you're both frustrated. You don't know what's going on. And I'm seeing a counselor, and I've been talking to him a lot about, how do I deal with this? Because in the beginning, you feel like such guilt because you're talking about your spouse and saying all this stuff, and then there's the grief because you don't know what's going on. And he told me that I really, really needed to work on my expectations, and I think that for me was a big key. For example, when Herb was diagnosed, so he would have been then. So there's 7 stages of Alzheimer's. So stage 1 and 2, you're figuring it out. You don't know what's going on. Stage 3 is usually when you get a diagnosis, and stage 3, the skill age is 13 to 19 years old. So you have to adjust your expectations to that. And I think that was where a lot of this stuff started to really come out. And at that point, it was affecting all areas of both of our lives. His behavior was careless and reckless. Like he couldn't see the danger in things. And that's when I really knew I needed support and even validation, because I wanted people to believe me. He would fixate on things, and at that point, it was really important to get him paneled and start the whole process. So that's kind of where things really started to take shape. And one thing I want to make clear is that when a family member goes through this, the family has to adapt with every stage. And I think that part is kind of missing for a lot of people. They can see what's happening to the person who is sick, but they don't see the impact on the family. And that is something I hope that I can encourage people to, with this information, to be able to have a better understanding.
What would you say to someone, like, I know I have a few people in my life that are at the beginning of this right now. They're in that frustrated part, a part where people don't realize it's not just the person who has been diagnosed, it's the family member. What would you say to that family member, that caregiver? What would you say to them as they embark on this journey?
The guilt and grief are, so in the beginning, I would say my guilt was 80% and grief was 20. Now my guilt is almost 0, and my grief is like right at the top.
How does someone going through this get to that point?
You have to, I would say it's a process. Like, it's like with any grief journey, you can't skip from to the end. I think, getting people to getting into some kind of support group where people will validate your feelings, where you don't have to sit and try to explain why you feel the way you do. Like, there's a group of us wives who always run into each other at Rest Haven. So a year and a half ago, we started a support group. Best thing ever, because you're all at different stages. Like, I think I said this the last time. Um, Caregivers, whether you're looking after a spouse with cancer or whatever, brain injury or whatever, caregivers all go through the same thing. The person we're caring for will be different, but caregivers go through the same burnout, the same anxiety, all that. And get help, like talk to people, find out where the resources are. It's very hard because at that stage, like, I'm pretty open, but there's a lot of people that are very private. They don't want anybody knowing. They cover up. Not The family isn't always in agreement on how to handle things. And I would, my big thing would be to say support the person who's doing the most caregiving. That don't make them feel even worse by not believing them or protecting them. I think part of it is just, yeah, you have to get help from your church, friends. And often in the beginning, it's like, I just need a break. Can someone just take them out for coffee? Or can someone, like, we really need to look after the person looking after the person that's not doing well. And yeah, how you make it, like, ask for help, or that's something that each person personally will have to figure out. My sister passed away in March of last year, but she was an intensive care nurse. And she gave me this quote, and for me, it kind of set me free in a way. And so I want to share this with anybody who's going through this. The progression of the disease is making the decisions for you. You are responsibly reacting to the changes to maintain safety and dignity for your loved one, yourself, and your caregivers. I'm going to say it one more time. The progression of the disease is making the decisions for you. You are responsibly reacting to the changes to maintain safety and dignity for your loved one, yourself, and the caregivers. When I was able to accept that this wasn't me who was kind of deciding everything, when my sister told me this, I sat there and I wept and wept and wept, because I was like, thank you. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. And I am responsibly reacting to the changes. And that, I think, is, I've noticed with caregivers, we need permission often. We aren't, our nature is to nurture. And so this kind of throws us into something that usually we're not comfortable with. And so be kind to yourself. I know, I wish I would have learned that sooner. I went through, I couldn't even cry. I could scream at God in my car. But I couldn't even cry. I felt like if I did, I would just lose it completely. And it was only in March when I was in the hospital with my sister, and I said, I just need to leave the room for a minute. She's like, where are you going? I said, well, I just need to have a good cry. She goes, stay with me and cry with me. And yeah, the waterfalls and unreal, like, and it was amazing. But people are always saying to you, oh, you're so strong. And really, we're not. We're just doing the best to cope and manage.
You mentioned God, crying out to God, screaming, being angry.
Yeah.
When it comes to your faith, how has that helped you get through all of this?
I remember standing up. So Herb was diagnosed fall of 2019. And in December, our church asked a number of people if they wanted to share something about 2019 and going into 2020 and all this, and standing up at the pulpit and just sharing Herb's diagnosis. People in our church knew something was going on, and our closest friends already knew. but our church as a whole didn't. And when I looked at the congregation, people were crying, and I knew that Herb was very loved. We had been deacons in our church and done a lot of things, and so the support from the church was huge. Our names are in the bulletin every Sunday. People are praying for us. Our friends have been amazing, but my spiritual life has just grown in leaps and bounds. My prayer life, my gratitude. I know some people say gratitude, but you know what? When you praise God and you go to Him for every little thing, your relationship changes. I mean, I've lost my best friend, and then I lost my sister, the two people that knew everything. And all of a sudden, you don't have your best friend, your two best friends, right? You have your other friends who are awesome. Don't get me wrong. But turning to the Lord and making Him my best friend, talking to Him about everything, and knowing that He has the future. I mean, like I said the last time, He promises to never leave us or forsake us. And Herb is 90% in a delusional state at this point. And he's like talking, but doesn't make sense. And I have to believe that because he's so content right now, that there still is a peace over him. And without that, I don't think I could cope if I thought he was suffering somehow. But yeah, so yeah, my devotional and prayer life have just been amazing. And again, I know people are praying, and that's how you get through. And yeah, I'm super grateful. I can't imagine not having that strength behind me. I really can't imagine it.
Going back to Rest Haven and her being finally getting in there, that was a place that you guys had actually discussed
Yeah,
before.
Herb had it.
How are things? You just said that he's 90% in a delusional state now, but how are things going when it comes to you and him now being in a personal care home? Because that in itself is a very tough decision for a lot of people to make.
It's huge, but my doctor was like, Linda, you got to get him on a waiting list. And at that point, he seemed pretty good. Stage 3 is not that bad, right? Compared to the other stuff that comes. But so for 2 months, I resisted. And now I wish I would have just done it right away. You're not always ready, and there's a part of you that resists that. But going back to this global deterioration scale, just to backtrack a bit, when Herb went into Rest Haven, he was stage 4, which is the behavior of an 8 to 12-year-old. And he could no longer look after himself. And that's when we had the caregivers at the house. So he was never alone. I felt like my life was completely consumed with him because I couldn't take a bath or do anything without him getting into mischief. At the end of stage 4 is when he went into Rest Haven. So at that point, he could still be taken out with his friends to go golfing, and he could still, like, I could still pick him up, take him to someone's house for supper, things like that. Then, so it would be just over a year and a half ago, he went into stage 5, which is 5 to 7-year-old. And when he went into the home, he would try to escape. He would pack up his room. He would, the adjustment was really tough. And for me, like going to an empty house, and I think the financial impact is huge. I had to sell our house and most of our stuff because I couldn't manage on just my salary to maintain everything. Stage 6, he slipped into that last summer. And that's when he became like a 2 to 5 year old. And that's when things got to the point where we couldn't reason with him, redirect him. He couldn't follow instructions. He didn't know a left, right, stand, sit. He couldn't like do it without coaching. And that's where I think I went through burnout.
Mm.
At that point, I was still doing a lot of his care in the home, even because he just wouldn't let anybody else help him. So I'd work full time and then go there and
Wow.
look after his hygiene or whatever. Um, During that stage, he started to reject me. Um, he didn't want my help anymore. And that's when, for me, I think it was the hardest because now this person that I love doesn't always know who I am and is resisting me. So not only was he not knowing who I was all the time, but now he didn't even want my help, right? So when I went for counseling, I I knew that I really needed help, and like I said, he talked to me about expectations. And so he talked to me about surrendering Herb and letting go of my expectations and just um, accepting that. What people don't understand is that every time your spouse changes, you have to totally change because you're being forced now to look at things from a different perspective. You have to adjust to the fact that now he can't do this. Herb used to be able to puzzle in stage 5. Well, he puts everything in his mouth now. He is
Mm.
stage 7 is infant to 15 months, and that's where Herb is now. Um, he loves touch, so I try to touch him a lot, like hold his hand or rub his arm. I bought him a toy to keep his hands busy, and that toy was the best thing I've ever bought. He sucks on the toy like a baby would comfort themselves with a soother. He needs full care. Like he goes from the bed, they lift him up and put him in a Broda chair and then pick him up, put him on the bed. They have to bathe him in the bed, do everything in the bed, and then he's back in the Broda chair. He doesn't, his sleep is, uh, it's different.
All over the place.
Yeah, he stares often into space, just talking. It's like he looks right through you. And his speech is very disorganized. But every now and then, he'll go, "I love you." And yesterday
Mm.
when I got through, he went, "Hey, gorgeous!" And I just about fell over. So there's these little pieces of his personality that still come out. So that I think, having this chart and being able to see, okay, this is where he's at now. It kind of brings you comfort because you're not second
Mm.
guessing all the time, right?
Yes.
I mean, we've had to cover his last year already. We had to cover all his mirrors. We have to make sure the blinds are down in his room so he can't see a reflection because he doesn't know himself anymore. And so if he
Mm.
sees someone in the mirror or the window, he freaks out because like there's somebody in his room. And I remember hearing that once. We had someone come to our church in Kleefeld to do something on Alzheimer's just to educate people. And she talked about that, how a person would see themselves in the mirror and be very upset that there was somebody in their room following them. And so when it started happening to Herb, I'm like, oh yeah. And the other thing is their vision becomes almost tunnel vision. And so when you go to talk to someone, if you go visit someone, you have to really be in front of them,
Mm.
get close and wait for their eyes to kind of click on you. And you can tell in the eyes when someone is paying attention to you or not.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so
It's amazing what you've just shared. Like we talked, it was about 2 2-ish years ago. And at the beginning, you said, Lewy body, it goes fast. Like this is a significant change
Yeah.
from when we last spoke. Now, you mentioned Rest Haven, and you mentioned that you wanted to give a shout out to
Oh,
the personal care home
yeah.
because they're with them every day. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, yeah, personal care homes, especially the nurses and the caregivers, the ones who are like in the healthcare aides, but even the kitchen and the cleaning people, like they all care about the residents. Like, and I'm there every day. I try to feed him lunch and supper because it's one of the times that I can get his attention. Um, they work so hard. They're compassionate care. They encourage, I would say, encourage and build a relationship with the staff. They are doing for you what you can't do for your spouse. And the communication is huge and they need encouragement. Like in Herb's, the first time he was on one floor initially. And in that household, during the year and a half he was there, 8 people passed away. So
Mhm.
now the dynamics change. You see how it affects the staff because they care. And in the home he's in now, a different floor, different household, they've had 2 recent that passed away. And Herb is oblivious to it now. He doesn't know anymore. But for myself, you get to know family members and it becomes hard and you just realize the staff, it takes special people and again, support them and encourage them. They sometimes have to do things that are very difficult. I mean, just think of Herb's size. He's over 6'2", he's like over 200 pounds and he's a baby. So that's a lot. Um, yeah, so I just really want to give a shout out to them. I also have a little book.
Mm.
Um, one of the on my Facebook page, Journey to Alzheimer's. Every now and then, people give me advice and give me tools. And there was this little book on Amazon. It's called "When Someone You Love No Longer Remembers" by Cecil Murphy, and it's a whole bunch of little stories. And then at the back, there's all kinds of advice. And it's so wonderful because there's a whole section on how to take care of yourself. And one of the things is the person you love isn't who he or she used to be. The behavior will become increasingly difficult. Remind yourself this is the way it is. Again, the acceptance, right? At the end of the day, say 2 things to yourself. I did the best I was capable of doing today, and all I can do is all I can do. And we need to just be kind to ourselves in that way. And you have to think about the future. So even though you don't want to think about putting your loved one in a home, the waiting lists at care homes is long. And even though you think, oh, we're not anywhere close to that, but you don't know how fast things are going to move or change. Um, yeah, and power of attorney and healthcare
Yes.
directive. Please, 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 please do it as soon as possible. I have used my power of attorney over 30 times.
Oh.
Um, and the healthcare directive is, my safety net too. So those things are, I think, if you can't get it done before, like, that your spouse has to be able to sit, or your loved one has to be able to sit in a lawyer's office without you and discuss this. So you have to do it while they're still cognitively able to do that, or it's too late.
Yes, that is super important. Going back to the Alzheimer's and your situation with Herb, um, what I love, I've grown up around personal care homes. My husband's a nurse, works in a personal care home. My mom's worked in a personal care home for 47 years. What I love hearing is that you continue to go back. My husband always says, if I'm ever at that point, Colleen, please don't come visit me. You continue to visit. What
Yeah,
keeps you going?
I just love them to pieces. That doesn't change. I Well, when I had to sell the house and most of our stuff because the financial impact when you have a husband in a personal care home, like everything changes. So I had to sell the house, and I burned out so bad that I had to. My son, thankfully, is a financial planner, and he sat down with me and he said, "Mom, you can retire." And I
Mm.
turned 65 in June, and then I retired end of October because I wanted to spend as much time with Herb as I could. Um, no regrets at all. I moved into Woodhaven, which is attached to Rest Haven. Thankfully, I don't even have to go outside on a day like today, and I could just walk down the hallway. So I can be there 3 times a day. I can take him to chapel in the morning, go back, then go feed him lunch, and then go back, and then go back, feed him supper. It's a freedom that I have that I feel is a privilege. Part of it was guilt. Like the guilt plays into this a lot. Anybody that says it doesn't, they're not
Mhm.
telling the truth. Um, and so, but my brother, who worked in a personal care home, said to me one day, "You know that Herb doesn't know that you're there or not, or there twice a day or not." And I said, "I know." He goes, "So then you need to accept that you're doing it for you." And it was like, yeah, I am. I'm doing it for me. No one's forcing me to do this. I'm doing this because I want to do this. And I think where the gratitude comes in is um, he's still here,
Mm.
right? He's still here.
Love that. I could talk to you for many more hours because this is powerful and again, it's something that people don't always want to talk about. But for those who are going to listen to this and go, "Wow, I'm in this spot," whether it be with Alzheimer's or something else, how can they maybe contact you? Can they contact you? How can they find out more information or resources that'll help them, especially along this journey with Alzheimer's?
Well, my Facebook page, Our Journey with Alzheimer's, is a good way to message me through there because then I know what the connection will be. Um, and through that, I've had people come to my house, sat and talked with them, trying to give them help and support and encouragement. There's others that we do something like this Zoom. Uh, I just want to be an encouragement, and I've learned through this, and I want to pass that on. Just yeah, would love to pass it on. I don't want to give my phone number, but my email address um, is lindaeweeb@gmail.com. And so that's another way to reach out to me.
I appreciate you so much and for being so vulnerable and so open and so honest with our audience. And I just thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be able to pass on information and hopefully encouragement.